John, rather than be tortured, was kidnapped under the rule of Domitian, who himself claimed to be God. He was the first Roman emperor that claimed himself to be God. He had the people sacrifice a little burning of incense specifically to him and to confess that he was Lord. Most of the, how do I say this, most of the Christians that are not in name only did that no problem. Most of the Hebrews who were believing and accepting the Deuteronomy 6 passage of one God, one true and faithful God, would not do that. So there was intense persecution. The intense persecution of the believers came from the non-believers, both Hebrew and Gentile. The year is about 100. The believers are scattered all over Asia Minor. Jerusalem is shambles. And so now we have this elderly man, last breathing apostle, writing letters of revelation that he receives from God from this prison island of Patmos. Some of the teachers last night believed that it was a prison on an island. Two of them believed that the island itself was a prison. And I thought, what difference does it make? He was isolated. He was a prisoner. He was taken away. Something on my ear. He was taken away from his community. So whether he was in a prison building or not in a prison building makes absolutely no difference and no sense to me at all. It wasn't even worth my time reading it. We went through his teaching to the community at Ephesus. Now we're going to look at his teachings concerning the other communities. We finish up where we touched on Smyrna. These letters, if not before, these letters participated or precipitated a great deal of people wanting to see the Apostle John, this last living, breathing, individual human who knew, who fellowshiped with Jesus, who, I'm using the Christian vocabulary, it's in my notes, that fellowshiped with him, that were with him at the Passover celebration. That's, I guess, the disrespectful term that I use as a tourist attraction. Maybe I shouldn't use that term, but that's exactly what it was. I want to come down here to the word tribulation that we just touched on last week. The tribulation does not mean the common trials, testings, and persecutions that is used and that I use in the remainder of the apostolic writings. But this tribulation, this word, means the wrath of God, the sufferings of God. Now, in the explaining of the tribulation, John does use the specific Hebrew phrase, the 10 days. I thought I knew and I believed and I was committed, and the 10 days means this and that's all it means, and now I don't know. Some think that he meant 10 years of persecution, as the days are counted in this book in what is commonly called prophetic days, each answering to a year. The 10 years of tribulation may denote, and this is part of my confusion from last night, 10 years of persecution. That was precisely the duration of the persecution under Dionysian, during which all, and the word churches is used in the Roman expression, all Asiatic churches were grievously affected in emperor worship. The other readers thought that Jesus meant persecution over the reign of the 10 the 10 Roman emperors. Now, different schools of thought. Stokes is with a school of thought called Torah resources. Out of the school of thought of Torah resources came a school of thought from First Fruits of Zion. The First Fruits of Zion and Torah resources were just like this, and then First Fruits of Zion began to teach some little weird stuff, and they went off here, and Torah resources stayed on track. But First Fruits of Zion, in their teaching of little weird stuff, also had lots and lots and lots and lots of good stuff. And one of the good things that I held to was this teaching that the 10 days represented the 10 emperors. The persecution of the 10 Roman emperors: Nero, Domitian, Trajan, Adrian, Hadrian, Severus, Maximum, and Decius, the 8th under Valerian, the 9th under Ardinian, and the 10th under Diocletian. The only one that was named Caesar was Julius, and the term Caesar from all of the other emperors were to acquiesce his power. Now there's one other strange and confusing approach. Others observe that in the 10 days are 240 hours, which make up the number of years from 85, when this persecution, when the year 85, when this persecution began, up until the year 325, when all the persecutions ended, and Alexander, if you can't beat him, join him, called himself a Christian. Others say the 10 days is simply an expression of speech. Now, see, this is how confusing it gets for a teacher to take the truth of what John was teaching in predictive prophecy and in the languages of that day, the expressions, the way things were taught, not necessarily the verbal languages. But the fact is that they and we are going to be tested, regardless of what the 10 represents. If this attack comes from the evil one, then why couldn't the believers in Smyrna just rebuke, like bind is the new buzzword? Why couldn't they just bind Satan and stop the attack? It's because the attack is from God, not from Satan. The attack is a tool. The attack is a tool of the Babylonians. It's a tool of the Assyrians. It's a tool of the Romans. It's a tool of the worldliness, in order to bring the people back to God, and rather than just a surface believing in God. Now, you will never, as open and as fresh and new as the wounds are. You will never hear anybody say that the Holocaust was a tool of God. In all of the to survive, the going back, the turning around, and the revival after the Holocaust, what came out? The nation of Israel. You'll never, it's way, way, way too early to hear anybody say that October 7th and that persecution and that attack and that horrible, horrible event was a tool of God. But look how it's bringing, or did, bring unity and purpose and expansion and love and unity. And in our case and some other ministries, the gospel back into Israel. It's way too early, but everything that God does like that, it is a tool. It's a key that fits in a lock. It is to make them aware of their sin and for turning around, about face. The English is repentance. The Hebrew is teshuvah, to come back to. And I went within one more door here. I'm reading about Smyrna. I'm reading about the purpose of the 10 days. I'm reading about the come back to. And then I find out in New York today, they have a building and a ministry and an outreach of the Hasidic movement called Teshuvah. They have a whole part of their corporation where they encourage any, and this is Jews, physically, Hebrews, they encourage any of them to come back, move into this community. They don't expect them to be Orthodox religious right away, but they teach and they teach and they teach, and it's called Teshuvah, to come back. The believers at Smyrna were literally given a pep talk of how to make friends and influence people with God and the things of God. They had no testimony on how faith made them anything in the Lord. They had no testimony about how false faith, the emperor worship, made me anything in the Lord. They were not promised deliverance from tribulation. They were not promised deliverance from poverty. They were not promised or revealed tribulation from anything. The worst was yet to come. That's the expression that you heard me use. We're not in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. We're going to go through in this life tribulation. And that's why it's so very, very easy for Bible-believing, solid, faith-teaching believers to teach that we're going through the other tribulation, the great tribulation. Because in a two words, in a sense, it makes sense. It does. But this is not talking about the trials, testings, persecutions of God in the first episode area. It's talking about what we're going through in this life as the believers were going through in Asia Minor under this horrible, intense rejection of the Hebrew people and persecution of Rome that led to emperor worship. This is a testing. This is a persecution that brings in maturity. But it seems in this case, they passed the test. The community, compared to the other 6, had no evil spoken against it. It's the only community among the 7 surviving communities that are written about today that has survived through the centuries of Roman and Muslim persecution. This survival, this physical survival, had to do with their faithfulness. We need to be tested. God is interested in testing us. We may not have the same opportunity to suffer or to suffer in the same way that Yeshua did for the believers, but we can have their same heart. We can have their same spirit or dedication. That we can exhibit as a tool of evangelism as Smyrna did. We can't have what they had, but we can have their heart. We may never be in a place to do a martyr's death. I hope not. But we can also make an effort to live a martyr's life. Can't say martyrs. I was trying to say murder. A martyr's life. Secondly, believers, for the most part, do everything they can do to avoid persecution, to avoid trials, testings, and sufferings, to live an exterior life as distinctly belonging to the Messiah and living a messianic life. And that's a good thing, as long as it's real. And that's something that I and you and all of us want to do. We want to avoid persecution. We want to live this life for the Messiah, regardless of what the 10 days represent. They are going to be a time of testing and suffering. Smyrna made it through, and Lord willing, we can too. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Now, this is not the crown of righteousness. Things that are different are never the same. What Yeshua said to these communities is important, but what he didn't say is also important. Yeshua didn't have a single word of rebuke or correction for the believers in Smyrna in this whole general area. All he had to say was the promise of a crown and the encouragement to be faithful until death, which literally means don't give up your testimony no matter how bad it gets. There are 2 different words that I've been able to find for the word crown. In the ancient Greek language, and of course that's the language that most of the older manuscripts we have are written in, one described the kind of crown as a king who wore a crown of royalty. The other kind of crown is used here as given as a trophy to a winning athlete. Now there I go. I don't remember what day it was, but I went down this rabbit trail. The crown of an athlete. And I got to I'm not going to stay on this, just bear with me a minute. I got to the 1936 Olympics. 1 year before the Nazi takeover, when Jesse Owens absolutely humiliated Adolf Hitler to the fact that Hitler would not face him, would not speak to him, would not shake his hand, would not acknowledge him as the winner of 4 gold medals. But Jesse Owens, in this unprecedented last moment of biblical power in the Olympics, wore the crown of glory. Under the Romans, it were just leaves that were woven together. Then crowns got more and more elaborate. They got more and more precious metal, precious stones. In the apostolic writings, you'll read about the crowns made of gold, silver, and have precious stones. These are called the crowns of righteousness. We see them in Romans chapter 13 at the judgment seat of Christ. It's what is called the theology and judgment seat of Messiah. We see it in other passages, but these crowns represent 3 things. They represent being alive. They represent the crown of life, which is walking and serving and doing right and winning the race. And they represent the crown of righteousness. Now I've had the hiccups. They represented the crown of righteousness, which is the crown of salvation, which we cast back at the feet of Yeshua at the judgment seat of Christ. So these crowns are important. What is the word? Figurative language that John is using. The promise of a crown was especially meaningful to the believers at Smyrna. They had physical crowns of beautiful buildings, Mount Pagos. They had the crown of the worshippers of the pagan gods who wore crowns. They had a cultural good citizens, being a good boy, being a good family crown that they would receive. But Yeshua promised the believer a special crown, and in this case, talking about the crown of life. A champion athlete, this is where I started off into Jesse Owens. I didn't start off into Jesse Owens, that's where I ended up. Received a crown of oak leaves, a cluster of oak leaves that were woven together. I don't want to go too far down that path. This was the crown of righteousness. This is the crown of we won. A crown which cares and conveys envy, not the bad kind, but respect for the athlete. And the king's crown, the crown of authority that was given over us, especially authority that was given over us that we're told to acknowledge in the book of Romans chapter 12 and chapter 13. Did I mention last week the audiologist? Yeah, I went back. This hearing aid had to be repaired. And he who has an ear, let him hear. I went back to pick up this hearing aid. And you got the audiologist and you got the ear doctor, the 2 sides of the hall at Jackson's Hospital. And my doctor went across the hall and got most of Dr. Ford's staff and brought them back over. You had patients sitting, you had patients waiting. And he said, now I want you to teach them about Deuteronomy chapter 6. I want you to teach them about the Shema. Now you can hear my voice, how gravelly and tired and old it is. Well, we did this whole lesson on the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We did this lesson on here, and all of these people are paying attention. And then he said they need to hear the tune. Now, I don't sing. I don't sing in public. I don't sing in private. I don't sing in the shower. Now, I sing in my head. I take good, godly songs and I change the words and I mess them up and I make when we all see the buffet, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see the chicken, we'll shout and sing the victory. Now, I take songs and I make up songs. I can't wait to write all this stuff down about the buffet. But I don't sing. He said, I want you to sing the Shema. And I'm gravelly and tired and can't hear myself think. And I look up and I got people with tears in their eyes and ashen white faces, an amazing look on their face when they understood what it meant to hear, O Israel, to hear, physically hear, and obey. It was a good moment. It was a good moment for me. It was a good moment for them. It was a good teaching moment for me. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the community. And just for a few minutes Thursday afternoon, we had a move of the Holy Spirit in that doctor's office. Oh, nobody walked the aisle. Nobody came down the aisle. I firmly believe that most of the people in that room were born again, good, Spirit-filled Christians. Nobody did anything that dramatic. It wasn't a Billy Graham crusade. But there were people in the room who heard and understood. I thank God that I got my hearing aid fixed, but God used the moment of my bad hearing and the bad hearing aid and the circumstance and the situation. God used it in order for me to have that opportunity. He used that tribulation for me to have that opportunity for a testimony. He that has an ear, let him hear. Through the Spirit of God, there was something to say to every one of these communities. This letter to the believers at Smyrna can apply, should apply, does apply to all modern Western assemblies of believers today, to the point that we simply don't face this kind of persecution that the believers did in the Roman Empire. We face persecution and God is going to use it, and we face rejection, and we face illegal and stupid laws that the woke world is trying to pass down on us every day. We're living through those, but Polycarp was a remarkable example of both the persecution and courage of the early believers. When Polycarp returned from Rome, this great persecution of Domitian came over the church, the community. Polycarp left the city and hid out in a farm belonging to some local believers. They documented that as he prayed, he had a vision of his pillow. This is not Bible. This is sacred history passed down from generation to generation. It's not Bible. His pillow engulfed in flames, and he knew what God said to him and calmly told his companions, I must burn. Now, he didn't burn in hell. He burned by going to the stake, and he left this farm, and he left this hiding, he left this place of renewed zealousness, and he went back into the city of Smyrna. He went back into the community. He went back into the synagogues. He mastered the testimony. He mastered what it meant to be with Timothy and to be with John. He mastered what it meant to be a believer, and he reluctantly was tied on a donkey and walked back to the city, where at the end of his ministry he was burned alive at the stake. I've got 3 paragraphs of the horrible tragedies, the bloodthirsty mobs and torture that were done to the believers in the arenas in Asia Minor. In fact, there's one arena in I can't remember the name of the city. I'll think of it in a minute. I know where McDonald's is. There's one arena where they still, in complete intact excavation, have the place where the animals came in. Now wait a minute, not just the animals. You gotta understand that men, women, boys, and girls were tied, and it was a show. It was a laughter. It was pass the popcorn. It was go get a beer. It was falling all over yourself, watching the entertainment of animals eat believers alive. That was the entertainment. The death by 1,000 cuts. I'm not going to read this to you. This is too much to be read on a Shabbat morning in a Bible study. It's too horrible. This is 1.5 million Jewish children in 1944, as the Russian troops approached Dachau to liberate it. This is 500,000 Jewish children being shoveled with pitchforks alive into open-end furnaces in order to try to clear the death camp before the Russians liberated. This is horrible, horrible persecution. But what did they do? They stayed faithful. They stayed strong. They stayed true. The days of the martyrs, such as Polycarp, have definitely not passed. All over the world, not so much here in America in our very wealthy, very affluent lifestyle, but all over the world, there are believers who face intense persecution. The Muslim world another rabbit trail. Hold on just a minute. Now, I've got to go back Wednesday and Thursday to a conversation with the religious Hindu. Hindus from northern India are persecuted by Muslims from South Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan and India separated because of Hindu, Christian, and Hindu and Islam. He said what is referred to in these persecutions as Islam are not true Islamic religion. It's a cult that calls itself Muslim, but they're not. And man, it finally dawned on me, with all of these Islamic terrorists, they call themselves Islamic, and Islam is not a good thing, but it is a cult, a separation, just like white supremacy, just like Black Lives Matter. It's a cult, it's a separation of the truth. It's an offshoot. And there's gruesome murder that take place in this so-called Islamic world. And we referred to one pastor in central India who led several thousand people to the Messiah in 1994. He was a Hindu what the British called Maharaja, a leader, who had changed his name to Paul James and was murdered by a crowd of extremists as he spoke in an open field February the 20th, 1994, following in the footsteps in Western India of the Apostle Thomas, excuse me. I'm thinking of John in the Revelation. There's going to be, I believe, this type of persecution before the Great Tribulation. This time of trouble and testings and sufferings for us is to hold the line, to toe the line, to keep the testimony, to die with our boots on. This hatred and violence have left many believers some wanting to return away from the faith, and some wanting to turn stronger to the faith. It is a harvesting, a sowing and reaping. And boy, here we are. We're right here. I studied all this 1971, 72, 73, 74. I didn't believe it was going to happen. I thought I was studying for the professor to understand that I understood what the other professors said to understand. I didn't believe that they would take sodomites, dress them up as women, have them entertain second and third grade children, that this kind of sexual perversion would be front page news by the time I got to the latter years of my ministry. I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that this kind of persecution that we're facing, and especially those facing outside of the Western world, this unreached millions and millions of people, but the gospel is spreading through the persecution. I had no clue. Oh, I had a computer, believe me. I learned a computer because I thought it was a hot deal and email was a big thing. And I started out with AOL email, and I was on top of the world, man. I could communicate with people so fast. I didn't need the post office. I didn't have to do any more postcards right now. But I don't know computers. I don't know the intricacies. But we went through COVID. Me and old and frail Bonnie and I stayed in the house for a year. We had people bringing us groceries, going out and taking a walk on the sidewalk when nobody else was there. We went through COVID. After a year, I just said to H with it, and we just went out and let the chips fall and be what they may. But it scared me for a year. But in that year, I was taught how to do evangelism on the computer. I came into an understanding of websites and sub-websites and placing this here, placing that. And now I've got the whole responsibility with the English-speaking world and Chosen People Ministries of receiving these email questions that people send in about I found Shalom and Isaiah 53, this chapter, Savior, change your life. I'm answering all these emails electronically, and I'm in the last 7 years, I've been able to witness to more people than I did the whole 40-something years before that. I can't praise the Lord for COVID. I can't praise the Lord for persecution. But I can sure praise the Lord for what God brought out of it. I'm taking this lesson from Revelation chapter 2. I'm not necessarily teaching you all of the history and the structure, the social this, and they stayed by the stuff. That's what they did. They stayed faithful. And they received a promise of a reward starting in 2:11. The promise of the reward. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. Now here's what I want to do. What is next week? Next week. Next week is you. If you want to continue exactly where we're at, and here's what are we overcoming? What is it that we have to overcome? He who overcomes. What? Where is it? Is it a salvation? Do we have to work to be saved? Do we have to overcome all this to be saved? If you follow up, you teach whatever you're led. But if you follow up, take a look at what are we overcoming and who is it. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate so much your attendance and your faithfulness in this study means so much to me.